Hi, and welcome to History Respawned. I'm your host, Bob Whitaker. On today's episode, we'll be discussing Total War Troy, the latest title in Creative Assembly's long-running Total War series. Troy is set during the Trojan War, made famous by Homer's epic poem, the Iliad. Players in Total War Troy assume the role of a Bronze Age leader participating in the central conflict between the Achaeans and the Trojans. The game includes traditional Total War elements, such as a strategic overlay, which you can see here, interspersed with occasional real-time battles. But Total War Troy also features RPG elements, centers around the famous leaders of this time period, including people like Agamemnon, Hector, and Achilles. Furthermore, the game mixes in elements of mythology, with players receiving bonuses or hindrances from the pantheon of Greek gods. Returning to History Respawn to help me unpack history from myth is Dr. Kate Cook. Kate, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks very much for having me.
Of course. So Kate, I know quite a bit about the Total War series. I played Total War Empire, Total War Rome, Total War Napoleon, but I know next to nothing about the Trojan War. So I was hoping we could start things off by having you give us kind of a brief background on the Trojan War, and then kind of an extended question: how does Homer and the Iliad fit into this history?
Well, to some extent, those two questions are much more intertwined. They're not really two separate questions, because the Trojan War that we only know of from first the poetry of Homer, and then the works of various poets, people who wrote Greek plays, artists and so on following Homer. The Trojan War is not, insofar as and how it's come down to us, is not a historical conflict.
Mm-hmm.
That there might have been a war. Some people are more committed to this idea than others, but we only know it in terms of this epic poem, the Iliad, as you said, that Homer's produced. Now, would you like to know kind of what the war is? Or?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so that is quite like how the game has portrayed it. The Trojan War apparently starts because Helen runs off with Paris, or is abducted by Paris, depending on who you ask. She's already married to Menelaus, and so Menelaus goes to his brother Agamemnon, who you're playing as at the moment, and says, we have to get her back, and let's also destroy the Trojans.
Awesome.
So they round up all the Greeks, they go over there, they besiege Troy for 9 years, and in the 10th year they finally defeat Troy, destroy the city, and kill all the Trojans.
Right. Okay. Well, that's a good...
Sorry for the spoilers.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, well, that was a good elevator pitch for the Trojan War. That's helpful. Again, I think this story is one that is often portrayed in, popular fiction, other books, popular histories, dad histories, as I talk about, books that you would buy for your dad or your uncle at the bookstore, but then also in major motion pictures. And I think that this game, having experienced some of those other popular portrayals of this history, this game borrows a lot from those depictions, those portrayals, and in particular the Troy movie from, about 15 years ago or so.
2004, yeah.
Yeah. And so you could see a lot of that influence, I think, on the way in which the characters are portrayed, and then the way in which some of the cutscenes are acted by the voice actors.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, so some of them more than others. So I think Agamemnon looks exactly like Agamemnon from the film, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's got the whole kind of Brian Blessed look going on there quite strongly around the mouth and chin. And also Paris is very much Orlando Bloom's Paris.
And I think we can see them in the diplomacy.
Oh, yes, if you've met him, you can have a look.
Yeah, so I don't know if I've met him yet, but we can get a look at some of these other... there's Menelaus, and then Achilles, and then on we go down the list. And I was curious. I mean, are these leaders here? Are they portrayed also in the Iliad? I mean, I read Homer when I was in high school, but I can't say that I have these leader names just off the top of my head.
Yes, most of the leaders are from the Iliad, so they've been quite careful with that. And something that I think is quite interesting as well is the kind of sub-leaders, the extra heroes that you can recruit in your faction. They are also quite often names that are mentioned in the Iliad, or in the case of Agamemnon, in kind of wider myths around Agamemnon. So they have been quite careful to pick names of people who appear in the Iliad or appear in Greek literature, which is quite nice.
Oh yeah, and then here's Hector.
Oh yeah,
and then Troy, and then Paris.
So there's Orlando Bloom acting as Paris.
And I'm curious. I mean, from the Iliad, is there any description of how these people look? I mean, from my memory, the kind of depiction of places and people wasn't so strong so much as it was focused on their actions, what they did.
Yes, absolutely. We get kind of limited descriptions, and you tend to get enough of a description of, say, a piece of clothing or some other kind of significant feature that you can identify them. So for Paris, for example, we're told that Paris dresses quite luxuriantly. He wears a leopard skin, which, in fact, it makes him almost look a little bit too fancy to be a regular soldier. Hector's got a shining helmet, which is one of his repeated epithets. So, yes, you've got Hector's fantastic-looking helmet in the game. So little details like that. And we hear that Odysseus is kind of unimposing to look at. It's only when he starts talking, according to the Trojans, that he really stands out. So small details like that. But the Iliad is not interested in giving us kind of detailed facial features or anything like that. So to that extent, that's probably a good reason why they've relied on things like the film to add a visual element a little bit.
Yeah, that makes sense. Oh yeah, and you had mentioned the kind of sub-heroes. I've got a couple of them fighting up here around Athens. And so, actually, I think there's another screen that we can use to look at these guys. And I can't remember what it is. The lion's share, is that it? No, that's not it.
That's if you want to make them work in your court.
Oh, here we go. So we've got these two here who are commanders of kind of smaller armies that I've put together, mostly to just try to expand territory around Agamemnon's starting points. And it is interesting to me. I think one of the compelling things about this game, and something that's kind of new to Total War, is the fact that you've got these characters from the Iliad who are portrayed in the game, but they've also got kind of RPG elements to them, so you can, say, like, upgrade their skills. There's a skill tree here you can add to their equipment, and these are pieces of equipment that I've won in battle. And so it kind of gives you, I think, in terms of gameplay, a sort of momentum, to build up your character, to build up their army. But at the same time, I think it gives the game developers an opportunity to add in a little bit more historical detail, where maybe in previous Total War games that was never really an option.
And I think actually the epic questline, the set of kind of epic victory conditions that you have to fulfill in this game, is really interesting for that. So all of them have a different epic questline, and they're drawing quite heavily on the Iliad or on other myths. Yes, so you haven't got quite as far in Agamemnon's. Do you mind if I slightly spoil ahead what you're
Please,
about to be asked to do? So in another mission, very shortly, Agamemnon, so you are going to be told that you have to recruit the hero Aegisthus, who is a cousin. Aegisthus in the Greek myth is the guy who is responsible for Agamemnon's murder. So he doesn't appear very significantly in the Iliad, but he does appear in the Odyssey and in Greek tragedies like the Oresteia, where Agamemnon's terrible fate is fully fleshed out after he returns from Troy. And so this is kind of like a really nice little extra mythical detail that they've put in, that as you progress down the epic quest, these details start coming in. You don't have to pursue them. If you just do the basic missions, it's like any other sort of Total War game. You just conquer all the areas around you and you can win that way. But if you follow the epic train, you get a storyline that's really specific to each hero. And so Hector's, for example, he and his brother Paris are trying to be supreme in Priam's favor over on the Trojan side of the map. So they're very different, but those draw really heavily on the literary and mythological material, which I really like.
Great. Yeah, I had no idea. I just thought that this was, among the general missions that Total War usually gives you, and I had no idea that it was actually based on Homer, on the Iliad. So that's awesome. And I think these missions here, you've got kind of the epic missions and then the smaller missions. These are useful to help build out your game, and kind of, in a way, I think they kind of serve as a tutorial. They encourage you to do things that will give you bonuses, will give you these rewards, but at the same time, they encourage you to do things that'll make the game more interesting for you. So I've been really curious about this epic agent, and then dealing with your vassals, dealing with your substates within your empire. So I don't know. It's fun, and it's fun to know that these epic missions are tied into the historical record, or at least as far as we know, the historical record actually was. So interesting. So I'll just start playing a little bit here, and maybe we'll do a few battles and see what comes out of it. And if you have anything that you're interested in talking about, please go ahead, and I'll just concentrate on being Agamemnon, I suppose.
Sure. Well, one thing I think that's quite interesting, well, it's going to be more interesting to me than anyone else, but I do think, having played Agamemnon a bit myself as well, it's interesting that they've decided to go for definitely Mycenae as his home base. There's actually a little bit of confusion about that in the Iliad and then in later texts, where he seems to be from both Mycenae and Argos. And there's not an awful lot of effort put in the Iliad to really specifying.
Oh, and there's Argos there. Interesting.
Yes,
okay.
But here Argos belongs to one of your allies. And I guess that's part of the gameplay, right? You couldn't possibly have Agamemnon being sometimes from Mycenae and sometimes from Argos in the game. That's not going to work as kind of where your base is.
Well,
he's
an allied here. So, I mean, but now that you've said that, I feel like I've got to take this over at some point. To maintain historical accuracy.
Well, the problem is Diomedes is kind of a good ally of Agamemnon. So if you kick Diomedes out, that's not going to be very...
Well, and he looks pretty strong too. So yeah, we'll stay friends for now, I suppose.
Yes, of course. I mean, both on the trail in the game and according to the Iliad, what Agamemnon's got to do before he can attack Troy is round up all of the other Greek leaders in order to take them over to Troy as his allies. So,
gosh,
that sounds
like a lot of work.
Yes, it is. And for Agamemnon, unfortunately, it's a work that comes with a terrible cost as well. So I don't know if the game is going to make you do this. I assume not. But according to the myth, before all the Greeks could set sail, Agamemnon had to sacrifice his daughter Iphigenia to the goddess Artemis. And that was the condition, that Artemis wouldn't let them sail otherwise. And so I don't know if it's going to make you do that. I hope not. So far, I haven't seen any sign of Agamemnon's daughter in this game.
Interesting. Yeah, I would say that there is a incredible lack of women at all, at least in what I've played so far. I do have a priestess who's serving as an agent who can kind of go through behind enemy lines and try to cause trouble, try to force the gods' hands in favor of Agamemnon against your enemies. But it really seems like most of the roles, political or otherwise, are left to men.
There are some Amazons. And actually on the Trojan side, Helen is operating as a leader. She doesn't lead a whole faction, but I have seen her when playing as Hector. She was holding onto a city for Paris, so she was part of Paris's faction. So there are a few kind of women around, and the Amazons in particular actually are a complete nightmare. There's the Amazons that came as a DLC, but there are also some settled Amazons, they're called in this, hanging around on the Trojan side of the map. In my Agamemnon game, they're now over on my side of the map.
Oh my goodness.
Raiding my cities.
Oh my gosh. Things have gone poorly.
Yes, well, they went all right until I kind of expanded too far, and then the Amazons showed up. So there's a few, but you're right that it is quite a male-dominated, particularly on this side of the map. It's slightly better if you're on the Trojan side because both the Amazons and then Helen are over there as their starting positions.
Interesting. So does that mean that Helen, if she's on the map, I mean, does she act as an agent, or is she somebody who can lead armies? Do you have any sense of that?
I think so. I've only seen her head appear, but I think she was acting as one of these sub-commanders. I'm not 100% sure, so perhaps one of the viewers can correct us and let us know what Helen's exact role is here.
Oh, and here we've got a trade offer.
Yes.
So this is a bad deal. And the computer, the AI, often comes to you with these really terrible deals. Now, I don't have much wood at the moment, much lumber, but at the same time, bronze, as I've found out, is a very valuable resource. And so trading bronze for this amount of wood is not worthwhile. I don't think so. I'm going to say no.
I mean, I'm sure they didn't mean to, but this in itself is quite Iliadic. There's a fantastic moment in the Iliad where these two warriors on opposite sides, Diomedes and Glaucus, meet up and they say, "Oh, our fathers used to be friends. Let's exchange gifts to kind of honor that friendship and not kill each other today." And when they do, Diomedes gives really rubbish armor and Glaucus gives a whole set of golden armor. And we're told that Zeus confused him and made him accept a really bad deal. So I don't think that's what Total War were going for when they put this together, but it's still nicely, you can see a historical element in there.
That's fascinating, yeah. I think trading and bartering has been a part of the Total War series since near the beginning, but it's interesting that there might be some historical accuracy to these terrible AI-created trades that the game throws at you occasionally. Okay, let's see. So I've got Agamemnon down here. I'm going to try to get him north. And then get my ally down here to the south to defend this territory. And, it's also kind of common for these Total War games that, you'll have your main capital city on your kind of main region. And this will be pretty well built up by the beginning, and you'll have a lot of these buildings, these structures, which help you build better units. And so it can often be the case where I'll forget that I'm not in my home territory anymore, and I'll start out and I'll go to Athens or something like that, and I'll not be able to reinforce my army because I can only build those units down here in my home territory. So it's a little bit annoying, but I suppose it makes sense.
Have you managed to recruit any of the mythological units yet?
So I have not, and it gave me an opportunity to do so, but I think I was low on bronze, and then I just completely forgot about it until you mentioned it just now.
Okay, fair enough. They're quite fun. They're kind of mythological figures made more realistic. So there are people called centaurs, for example, or gorgons and so on, and they've instead of having them as full-on mythological figures, the centaurs are extremely good riders and kind of quite bulky and big, and so there's scouts and warriors in this group. So they've made them less mythological, but they're still a little bit more overpowered than the regular units. So you still get this sense that they're a bit more epic, a bit more exciting than just your local youths with spears. Of course, centaurs is very inaccurate. There's no centaurs in the Iliad.
Oh, darn.
Interestingly, the mythological elements of the Iliad are not all that significant, actually. There's one moment where Achilles talks to his horses and his horses talk back. But otherwise, you get a lot of direct intervention by the gods, but you don't get sort of fantastical elements, magic or kind of magical monsters and so on. People talk about them, particularly when telling stories of other things that they are aware of, the adventures of Hercules and so on. But we don't see them in the poem itself.
Interesting. Yeah, I again, just going on with the small amount of the Iliad that I read in high school, it does seem to be the case, like you said, of them mentioning these supernatural forces. But it seems like I don't know. I mean, how do you think the game deals with that? It's kind of one of these things where you do have continual mentions of the gods. When you go into a battle, for instance, you can have the favor of Ares, for instance, when you're fighting. But I haven't seen anything just yet that has any kind of supernatural elements to it.
I think, so personally, I would have liked to see a little bit more of the mythological stuff lent into. I think the desire to make this seem historical is a bit of a losing battle since we have no evidence this war ever happened. Why not just lean into the mythological side and make it more fun, I mean, people are always very interested in whether or not the Trojan War really happened and what it was like and how much it was like Homer, but we have no information of any kind. So I think they had room to be more fun here. But in terms of how the gods work, that is quite nice, because I suppose if you had direct interventions from the gods on the battlefield, which is something you do get in the Iliad, when they show up, they are almost, except for Diomedes and Achilles, who have some success against gods. For everyone else, going up against a god is just suicide. It's just not going to work at all. So I suppose they couldn't really have them popping into your battles without extremely unbalancing the situation.
Sure. And, I would say the battles have been a little bit odd. I mean, having played other Total War games, I'm used to having cavalry. I'm used to having some form of artillery. And so here in this Bronze Age conflict, to have everybody on their feet, not really, or I haven't seen any horses yet. Nobody's had a horse. And then also to have artillery simply be, people throwing spears. It's been kind of a very grounded experience with the war so far. And I'm wondering, how much that changes as I go forward in this campaign.
As far as I've seen, I think you can recruit chariots, which is a good Iliadic detail. Although in the Iliad, the chariots are just used for transporting soldiers. So people will get on their chariot, ride somewhere, and then get off and fight. They don't fight in their chariots. And I don't know whether that's the same in this. I assume not, because that would be quite difficult to manage. And the centaurs are certainly mounted, if you can recruit any of those.
Interesting. Okay. Lost treasure. I am going to be generous and share with the population. Dark birds.
Yeah, these portents. I love these portents, actually. They're quite clever.
So what does this come with?
So this is going to make people unhappy. Yeah, and also...
Great.
But it's quite realistic, this. So there's all sorts of them. There's these birds. There's some things about earthquakes, and there's some issues with crops or fishing or whatever. And they just show up, and it's nice that the little text says we don't know what's caused this. It could be Athena. And that's probably quite realistic, both in terms of sort of a general Greek attitude to the gods, this idea that sometimes stuff happens and you think perhaps a god is behind it, but how would you possibly know, because you can't communicate directly with them. But also with the Iliad itself, I did say that in the Iliad sometimes gods show up directly and they have conversations or they get involved in the combat, but also sometimes heroes or characters will pray to a god and they don't know what the response is, but the audience, there's one famous instance where all the Trojans pray to Athena to save the city, and the narrator says Athena shook her head, turned away, and said no, and the Trojans don't know this. Only the reader or the listener to the poem finds this out.
Okay, and then here we are with Troy, and they've had their earthquake. I think it was about maybe 7 turns ago in this campaign. Poseidon is very angry with them, apparently. And so this is a note to say that the garrison is functional again and that they've patched up the damage to the walls. Unfortunately, I missed my window, I suppose, to take out the Trojans, or at least to make that job a little easier.
Yes, but Poseidon will carry on being angry with the Trojans, so you'll probably have another opportunity.
So, can you give me any background on what's Poseidon's deal? with the Trojans? What's the story there?
Well, there is this myth, which is not kind of directly discussed much in the Iliad, but is attached to the wider circle. What we've got with the Iliad is we've got just one poem, and then we've got the Odyssey as well, that are the earliest. And then we're aware of descriptions of other poems that were circulating either just afterwards or at a very similar time, that kind of give us more myths. And then we find those myths in later texts. So we know that there are myths that kind of existed around the time that are not in the Iliad itself. And this is one of them, this idea that Poseidon and sometimes Apollo helped build the walls of Troy and then weren't paid for it by the previous generation's king. And so they have this huge thing about wanting to tear the walls, although Apollo then is on the Trojan side and doesn't really seem to care about this, but Poseidon is particularly unhappy about it.
Sure, yeah. I think everybody can understand an unpaid contract. I mean...
Yes. And Poseidon in the Iliad also has this thing about stuff that is built that looks like it couldn't be torn down.
Mm-hmm.
So he is quite unhappy when the Achaeans build a wall as well, and a kind of a ditch and a rampart, because he expresses the fact that if you build stuff that can't be torn down, it makes him seem less powerful because he is the god of earthquakes. Which is, I mean, they're all ridiculous. The gods in the Iliad and the Odyssey are ridiculously petty about the things they get angry about.
Okay,
so in that
see.
regard, Troy's massive walls and towers are a bit of a problem as well.
Sure, yeah.
Shepherd of the people.
Hubris, obviously. Let's get into this. I just want to make sure I'm not missing any missions or anything like that. Oh, royal decree. That's what I wanted to look at. So occasionally you get these opportunities to issue royal decrees, and this gives you a chance to add bonuses to your empire, to civilization. And these, I thought, were somewhat interesting. Obviously, they kind of break down along whatever resource you're interested in gaining. So there's one for gold, one for grain, and then one for stone, and I think there's bronze and lumber. But some of these descriptions here I thought were interesting. And I don't know, it's kind of one of these things where they've got these descriptions, and then they've got these images to go along with them. And I think it's kind of going back to these ways in which this time period, particularly the Bronze Age, but then also specifically the Iliad, is often portrayed in historical fictions. And I see a lot of similarities between these types of images and these types of ideas with regards to Bronze Age resources that seem to be pulled from either other movies or from other historical fictions that are set during this time period. So I don't know. I thought that was curious.
Yeah, and the language, if you hover above the little guy, the little Hermes shoes, so the quick, that one, these little quotes they put in are quite interesting, and those appear kind of whenever you do anything as well. And the language they've used is really interesting for some of these. You can now go back and do whatever you wanted to do. You don't have to stick to marching drills.
Yeah,
but the
this
fact
will be
that
fun. Campaign movement, that's good. Yeah.
Sure. The fact that they've given these little quotes, and sometimes on some of the loading screens, you get a real quote from the Iliad.
Yes.
And then somewhere else, you'll just get something which they've given a sort of epic flavor to. So they might add in a particular epithet, like the Agamemnon goes on about being rich in gold all the time, for example. Or when you recruit particular soldiers, they have little descriptions. So they've tried to make it kind of epic or Iliadic language, even where they're not quoting the Iliad, which I quite like. It kind of runs through all the ways everything is talked about in quite an interesting way.
It makes it feel consistent. I think you're right about that.
Yes, and it means it feels sort of authentic, doesn't it? Even when they're not directly quoting the Iliad, it's something that could be said in the Iliad. Mm-hmm. It's the right kind of language. Oh, I see your little priestess coming down here.
Yes. Hopefully she'll be able to do something worthwhile down here. I'd been attacked by this small city-state, and they'd sent their army. I destroyed it, and then it took me, I'd say, a good 25 minutes to figure out where they had actually come from. And I think that's kind of one of the weird things about this map. I have no background in any of this history, any of this area, other than from playing, Assassin's Creed Odyssey. And so to have all of these different cities, I have just been completely confused as to where everybody is.
Yes. I mean, I do have more background in this kind of area, and I still find that quite hard, actually. And particularly on one side of the map or the other. Sometimes, so I apparently went to war against Troy about 20 turns into my Agamemnon go, and I still haven't seen any Trojans or been anywhere near Troy. They just showed up from somewhere. So it can be very difficult to retaliate or work out where I'm supposed to be at war, because the map is so big. It's beautiful, but it's very big.
Oh no. My priestess has been wounded. She'll survive. Oh, geez. Well, I thought I would be able to show off her skills, but apparently that's not going to happen during this playthrough.
No.
Look
at that fantastic picture.
I know.
Is that what you were just going to say?
I was just going to ask you about that. What do you make of the way in which they've adapted this kind of this art for this game?
I really like it. I mean, they couldn't have done this style across the whole game, right? Because it would be too different to what we expect from a Total War game. There is a game, I don't know if you've seen it, Apotheon.
Yes.
Where the whole game is designed like a set of Greek vases. And that's very cool. And here it's much more limited, but I really like that they've given us these little inserts. I mean, this is not quite what you'd see on a Greek vase. It's too detailed. Everyone's a little bit too fluent.
Not the blood spatter here and here.
Yeah, that's a bit much. It's a bit kind of over elaborate for a vase, but it's enough of the style that you get this kind of feeling of authenticity, which is quite nice.
Yeah, kind of a sensibility of the age.
Yes, although, I mean, actually, it's worth saying that most of the kind of pottery that people think of as Greek pottery is quite a lot more modern than the Homeric epics. So actually, it's a general ancient Greek feeling rather than being
truly
even
bronze.
quite as far
Yeah.
back. Yes, yeah. But they're nice. I like them.
Yeah. I'm so disappointed. I was hoping to show off what she could do for the playthrough. Maybe we can get to her here in a moment.
She should come back in a couple of turns.
Yeah. Let's see if I've got any sort of hero not moved, construction. Let's see. Let's add that, I suppose. How's my wood? That's good. Okay, fine. Wood on.
Strong in
I notice you run down your food costs much more than I do.
Well, it's kind of it's a strategy, I would say, and the strategy is to attempt. I don't know why I can't fight. I can't go in there. What's going on? Well, interesting. Maybe I'll just go to the next turn. The strategy is essentially to build as big of an army as possible, and then attempt to take over new settlements and new cities before I run out of food. So that's my strategy so far. I would say that it's gotten very close on a few occasions, but for the most part, it's been okay. But it does look like if I'm losing 2,000 grain each turn, that it might be a close run thing. I might have to suddenly declare war on somebody in order to make up for this difference sooner rather than later.
Of course, I've not tried yet, but presumably when the Greeks go over to Troy itself, that's going to be a bigger issue, because you're going to be so far away from all your home places. Yeah. Things like recruitment and so on is going to get much harder.
Yeah, I think recruitment is curious because, like I had mentioned before, you kind of have to be in your home territory in order to recruit the type of units that you want. And I would also imagine, I haven't seen this myself, but I would also imagine that there's some sort of war weariness mechanic. In other words, I've been watching the Spartans expand around this territory, and it does look like when they're going off to see like Menelaus out here, there's these moments where it looks like they kind of have broken hearts hovering above them. And so I'm wondering if there's some sort of mechanic in which the distance from your battlefield to your home country or your home territory could lead to some sort of attrition on your army.
Yeah, there's certainly attrition when if you're just going across deep water. unless you have fought enough battles that your hero is now feeling great on water, and then that removes some of the attrition. But I haven't. The hero I've played the most, I've played some Agamemnon, some Hector, but the hero I've played the most is Sarpedon, and he has a lot of problems on his doorstep at the start of the game, so I haven't really expanded anywhere else with him yet.
Okay, let's try this again. I don't know. Why can't I go in there? I was really hoping to have some sort of battle, but for whatever reason, it's not working. So I think what I might have to do is just declare war on somebody else in order to get a battle.
You could go up to Alpanos. That's the same people, isn't it?
Is it? Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yes,
Okay.
same faction. See if you can get in there.
Let's take a trip. Could be another city here. No, I guess not. And we're still at war. I swear we are.
Yeah,
let's see.
Looks like it.
Yes. War. Curious. Okay, well. Sorry to disappoint. It's one of these funny things where I felt like up until this point I've been fighting a battle every turn, essentially, and now all of a sudden everybody's gone. Maybe they've gone over to fight the Trojans. I'm not sure.
Well, it looks like Diomedes is still hanging out there, so he hasn't gone over there yet.
And here we go with the
There's
Amazons.
Amazon.
Yeah.
Hippolyta's Amazons who start off, yeah.
And then we've got these kind of descriptions here for these non-player characters, and which gives you kind of a sense of what they're like as a character in the game. And so you've got kind of these ideas of, what kind of mission they're hoping to achieve in their playthrough, and then also what type of allies they've already gained. And so it's kind of one of these things where it's like, well, maybe they're offering me something good, but if they're, an ally of the Trojans, then, maybe that's not worthwhile. Maybe that's not in my best interest. So I will respectfully decline. And then they kind of leave you with a parting shot there, which is always nice.
Yes, I really like that the leaders kind of say things about you. All of the leaders, so in my Agamemnon, I'm afraid I've been extremely aggressive and broken a whole lot of non-aggression pacts and so on. So everyone really hates me, but everyone is supposed to hate Agamemnon. He's everyone's least favorite character in the Iliad, so it felt appropriate.
So from my memory, there's a big conflict between Agamemnon and Achilles.
Yes.
And, I want to say that's kind of near the end of the war. I should probably stop talking my ass here, but it seems like the Iliad is kind of focused on the last few years of the war, and then this conflict between Achilles and Agamemnon seems like the major focus. So what is the basis for that? Why does everybody hate Agamemnon?
Well, first, the Iliad you're right that it is at the end of the war, but it's focused over even less time. It takes place over about a month. Some of the time is a bit sketchy because it's not totally clear when a whole day has passed and when it hasn't in parts of the poem. But it's kind of a handful of days at the end of not at the very end of the war, but just before the end of the war, in the final year of the war. And yes, Agamemnon and Achilles have a fight at the very beginning of the Iliad, which then shapes the whole Iliad. And this is about Agamemnon he has to lose one of his prizes, which is a woman. And he says he's going to take Achilles' prize, another woman, instead. And Achilles says this is totally unfair. And anyway, you make us do all the fighting and the work, and then you take all the good stuff, and I quit. Effectively, I mean, it's not. Neither of them is particularly edifying. But then Agamemnon also has trouble with various other. He tends to be quite abrasive as a leader. So he shouts at Diomedes, and a friend of Diomedes is for not fighting well enough. He shouts at Odysseus for not fighting well enough as well. He says about Odysseus that you're always first to the feast but last in the battle line, which I quite like.
Nice.
And that's his leadership style. And he has various other things as well. He has a dream that it's not totally his fault, but Zeus sends him a dream to confuse him, and so he tests the loyalty of his soldiers by saying, let's all go home. And they've been there for 9 years. They're desperate to go home. And then he says, oh, actually, that was a test. Now you've really ruined everything, because they all run back to the ships.
Wow.
And
Okay.
Odysseus has to help him get them back. So he's and also he's very violent, and he speaks very violently as well, particularly about the Trojans. Things like he says, we're going to destroy Troy, and we're going to kill even the unborn babies in their mother's wombs. We're going to rip out and
Yikes.
kill. I mean, he speaks like that a lot, which a lot of the other Greek heroes at least don't so often. So this is why he's pretty unpopular, and why I thought making him extremely violent within the game would seem appropriate.
Oh, wow. Well, I had no idea of this guy's backstory, and I'm a little bit embarrassed that I've chosen Agamemnon as my player character. Tough look for my guy. And so we've got this advisor here who is, I think, supposed to be Homer, I suppose, but he comes in occasionally to remind you of certain elements from the game, to warn you about certain things, and then also he serves as kind of the master of the tutorial for this game. So little Homer here coming in occasionally, and he early on in the game, I'd say the first 10 turns, he interjects quite a bit, and I get really tired of him. But otherwise, this is useful because I had no idea that my city was under threat from a foreign army. So this is a good interjection. Thank you, Homer.
Yes, he's definitely meant to be Homer. You can see that he's blind, so that's a kind of an attempt to depict Homer.
So what do we know? Yeah, do we know much about Homer? Beyond the epic poems that were left behind. Anything about him personally, or his history? Yeah, that's what I thought.
We have, so this idea of Homer as a blind bard actually doesn't even come from stories about Homer. It comes from a character in the Odyssey who is a blind bard who sings when Odysseus is gone to dinner with the Phaeacians. He sings this song about the fall of Troy. Because he's a poet singing about the fall of Troy, some people, including some ancient people, this is not kind of modern scholars making this up, the ancient Greeks made this stuff up as well, say, well, that's a self-insert, that's a depiction of Homer. And so these stories circulate in the ancient world about Homer being a blind bard, just like this blind bard in the Odyssey. But there's no useful information at all. And some scholars think, in fact, there was no such person as Homer. It was a group of poets working together.
Interesting. So where do you fall on that line? Do you feel like it was one person? Do you think it was many?
All the classicists listening to this are now going to start sending me angry emails. I mostly don't care, actually. I think, we have the poems, and the poems are fantastic, and I've got an awful lot to say about the poems and how fantastic they are, and interpreting them without really it making an awful difference to me, whether it was made by many people or one person. I like the idea that there was at least a strong guiding influence, particularly because the consistency of some things, it's worth saying there's some terrible inconsistencies, which is one reason why some people think it wasn't one poet. Things like characters who are dead in one scene and then alive later, or very strange different uses of language and so on. But there are also some consistencies of things like theme and imagery and so on building up across the poem, which make it difficult for me to rule out the idea that there is one person behind all of this. But I'm pretty open-minded. Until we have some more evidence, I think either is possible.
Okay, well, it looks like I've got an enemy army here, and then there's also one here right at my doorstep. I might try to send this Athens army down here to fight this one. Yeah, and he might be going. And I don't know if there's a chance to have naval battles in this game, but
they land on an island, so you can have two armies that are at sea attack one another, but they land on an imaginary island and fight there.
Oh, no kidding. Well, that's, I suppose, actually, I would say that's kind of a ridiculous gameplay mechanic, but at the same time, if you were to land on a random island, I would say that the coast of Greece would be a good place for that. I don't know if you could have a full-scale battle, but there are plenty of tiny little islands where that would make sense, at least, I suppose. I mean, if we've got a game with mythology in it, we might as well have imaginary islands.
Yes. Yeah, you're right. There's plenty of spaces. You could see that they could easily just pull into one of those little four between Salamis and Aegina, for example. But I guess they didn't want to try animating, real naval battles.
Okay, so we've got a war going on between Achilles, and it looks like somebody up by him. And so I'll say yes to Achilles. I'm playing the nice version of Agamemnon. I maintain my alliances. I don't complain. It's funny to hear so much about Agamemnon and, the perspective of other Greeks to him. It seems like he maybe took some lessons on pettiness from the Greek gods. So maybe it's not so strange to have the leaders or gods acting in this way, especially in these epic poems. I'm not sure. Maybe there were some nice gods, some nice leaders in these poems.
Well, there are some that are less bad than others, certainly. The problem is there's kind of the ethical system, such as it is in the Iliad, and again, this is something that scholars have been really interested in for a really long time, is not what we would necessarily think of as a kind of ethical system, and it's really focused on individual honor and individual benefits. What really matters to people like Agamemnon and Achilles is whether they are being honored by everyone else. They don't care about whether what they're doing is necessarily moral. It's all about, is it going to bring them honor or is it going to make them ashamed? Are people going to laugh at them or criticize them for it too much? So they're all relatively bad.
Oh, so here we are. We've got our first opportunity for battle. We might end the stream with this, and things are not looking good. So the army that I've been trying to fight for the past 45 minutes have finally shown up, and unfortunately they are better equipped than my army, and they've got some extra reinforcements here from the settlement garrison. So I'm in a bad way here, and in terms of the balance of power, the game predicts that I'm going to perhaps lose this, and if I hover over auto resolve, it'll be a close defeat. So let's see if I can pull victory from the jaws to defeat here. And we'll get one of these loading screens here with some reference to the Iliad.
Yes, these are all quotes, although frustratingly it doesn't say where they're from, and also sometimes it doesn't say who's talking. So it's lovely to have them in there, but I would just like a little bit more information, personally.
So we can take a look at the strategic view here, and it looks like I might be better off positioning my troops up here on a hillside. And unfortunately, there's so many of them that they can't all get up there. There we go. And then maybe, let's see if I'll go down here a little bit, and I will arrange them. I suppose I should have a missile front, because I don't think they've got many missile characters or soldiers. Then we'll have Agamemnon and my regular troops in the rear.
It looks like there's reinforcements coming in behind you.
Yeah, I've seen that. I don't know how many reinforcements there actually are, so I think I'll be okay like this. I do want to try to be prepared for whatever this host of troops sends at me. Okay. All right, well, here goes nothing. This could be incredibly embarrassing. I wish I had recorded a different battle. So as I had mentioned before...
Oh, look, here's Homer telling us about high ground.
Oh, great, thank you. So as I had mentioned before, there aren't many cavalry artillery units in the Bronze Age, so you've got men on foot. You've got kind of a host of javelin throwers, slingers, spearmen, militia members, and then your kind of flanking units are these swordsmen. And so these are units you usually want to have on the side so that you can flank, but given the fact that I'm outnumbered here, I don't think I'm going to be doing much flanking. I think I might be flanked. So here's the reinforcement. He's kind of skulking here in the woods, although it's one of these hero characters, not a major hero, but a commander. And I don't know. I suppose he'll attack whenever the other army gets closer, but he's kind of chilling out over there. All right, well, I'm definitely not going to make the first move. And it looks like they're going to take their time getting over here. So I think what I'll do is I will...
It's one thing I find a little bit frustrating in these battles
forward.
is if you're quite split up, it takes everyone a long time to walk over and start fighting.
Well, the fast forward button helps quite a bit with that. But yes, I agree. And then here we've got him very slowly making his way over.
Since I don't think you're going to win this battle, it would be... Sorry, Bob.
That's okay. I agree.
But it would be quite good if you can get your commanders to fight, because I've noticed something quite interesting when that happens.
Oh, well, let's take a look at that. Why don't we peel off Agamemnon here and have him go after?
He can still be kind of among the soldiers, that's fine.
Sure. And they'll slowly saunter over to each other. We get some pretty good detail here of the individual troops and his shield and his club. Nope. And here we go. Ooh.
Yeah, so they get these little combats, and actually, if you do them in the middle of the armies, so if any of your troops had come with these two guys, if you've got two commanders fighting one another, the troops will just sort of stand around watching. Which is really fascinating. And actually, that is quite Iliadic, because there's quite a few moments in the Iliad where two kind of named heroes will fight, and there's no impression that anything else is going on around them. Unlike a kind of standard battlefield where you might expect everyone to be trying to get their weapons in there.
Sure.
You just get these little kind of solo combat situations. So I really like how they've done that.
All right, and let's see how the rest of my army is doing. Not good. Is the answer.
Sorry, I removed your commander from the battle.
No. We're interested in the history here. We're not interested in how Bob's army is actually performing. Pay no attention to the unfolding disaster. Oh gosh, and they've got so many troops that they can just envelop me. This is very bad. Okay, well let's send Agamemnon back. Maybe he can be injured and die with his troops. Let's see. Let's have him run back over here. And you can see you've got these kind of, again, RPG powers that you can invoke during the course of the battle. And these vary based on who the character is. But we'll see if we can use this leader of men to affect these soldiers here. Hopefully give them a better chance. Oh yes, this is very bad. We've got these young spearmen moving behind us here. Let's see if I can get... This is not too bad yet.
Your line is holding quite well on the right there.
Oh no, we've got some rear guard action here.
These guys, these ranged units all run away really irritatingly if anything attacks them.
Well, I think it's because they're in skirmish mode. And so that's why they run away. Oh, and things are going to go really badly here. Let's see. Stamina? Sure, why not?
Can't hurt.
Okay, and then here they are facing one another. And you're right, they kind of envelop, but they kind of back off.
Yeah, they just sort of watch. They're interested, and they'll actually kind of make a nice little circle all the way around them sometimes. And then if your leader starts losing, they sometimes join in, but you still get this kind of two heroes battling it out with all their men around them.
Ooh.
There's one guy trying to join in. But I quite like that. It's quite realistic feeling, according to the poem. I mean,
Sure.
I'm sure real wars do not happen like this, but... Oh, you can have an Aristeia.
Yeah, let's do that.
I am the king who rules all.
Hopefully that has some...
This will be most unpleasant.
This trash talking could use a little bit of work here. Let's see how the rest of the army is doing. Miraculously still holding.
And you scared off the little commander there.
Yeah. Where are my melee or my ranged units? Let's see.
They've all gone really far away.
Let's go over here and help the army. They're like, we're helping. We're just in the back here. Don't mind us.
So sometimes I don't know if it's a good strategy, but I do sometimes make my ranged units get into this kind of skirmishing situation and pull off units from their main army. But it does just mean that then they get really far away
Yeah.
and don't feel like they're contributing much.
Oh, look. This leader here. Oh, too much. Agamemnon was too much for him. It's fantastic. Oh, and here Agamemnon's here by himself? That's odd. Okay. Let's do some more morale build up. And yeah, sure. Let's just use all of these and then send him into combat. I've lost a swordman here. And let's skip ahead a bit.
Your warriors
Holding
have
out
been
better than the power bar looked like you would.
Right. Again, these melee guys, very confident when they're over here just fighting two enemy units.
Hey, they're doing all right against these two enemy units, though.
Young spears. Okay, let's try
warriors
this.
are rallying.
Well, they're just going to lose the high ground here. I don't know why they're running down this hill. I'd prefer
Yeah,
if
and
they
even
just stay
worse, you
there.
can get trapped against the invisible barrier at the end of the field,
Oh, great.
which is really not helpful. You
Something
take a lot
else.
of losses.
Something else to look forward to, I suppose. All right, so things are looking really bad here.
Oh dear, they've all
And-
fled from the middle.
Yeah, and I think what I might do is just issue a general withdrawal. I can't remember how to do that. Let's see, toggle melee mode. Usually there's an option to send them away. And apparently they're content to just be chased around the entire battlefield, I suppose.
At least Agamemnon hasn't run for it yet. I feel like when your main commander turns tail and runs, then you know you're in trouble.
Warriors are rallying.
Oh look, they're back in single combat with the
They
other.
are. They can't help themselves. He's doing okay. Let's get some good blows in there. Okay, let's speed this up a bit and see what happens. I don't think there's much I can do to save this army. It used to be the case that you could just tell your characters to withdraw by moving them off the map, but
I think you can tell them one by one to withdraw. Oh no.
oh no.
Agamemnon's fled.
Oh.
I cursed him.
Oh, there he goes.
Yeah.
And we've got this militia group just hanging out here.
Homer really doesn't approve when the heroes do things badly. Oh, he's recovering.
You have the high ground. May your faithless
There he
hero
goes,
flees
okay.
like a craven dog. How dare they leave your warriors leaderless?
Wonderful.
Your warriors have spotted hidden foes.
I also like when you're down to about 2 units and they're fleeing the scene when Homer will say, "Careful, you are losing ground," and you think, well, okay. More than losing ground.
This is wild. I could just have these ranged units simply run around the entire battlefield and then eventually pick off these warriors.
One of your units has no more ammunition.
Oh,
Eventually they
unless
get
they run
too
out of ammo. Yeah.
Yeah, they run out of ammo, and also they get really upset at watching the rest of the army run, and sometimes they just run too.
Let's get some detail here of some
You are losing ground.
hand-to-hand combat. And it is not looking so good. All right, well, I think I've seen enough. I think I'm ready to leave this battle. Concede defeat. Yeah. Yes, I am definitely sure. I do not want a rematch. Oh, tough look. 500 some odd troops remaining.
Oh dear.
They did lose quite a few, but still, it's not great.
You get these little things, which is presumably taking place inside a pot. That's why you've got this curved.
I suppose. And then the pot's cracked because I've lost. Valiant defeat.
Yeah.
I am a little bit curious by how small his shield is. I don't want to shame a commander, but this is kind of an embarrassing compared to Agamemnon's shield. And maybe he's compensating for something. I'm not sure, but
Well, Agamemnon is all golden. Look, he's got much better gear.
yeah. Well, too bad he's not a very good commander. Well, now that I know Agamemnon's such a bad guy, I don't feel too terribly bad about him losing this battle. All right, let's see. We'll just say yes. I don't care anymore. Things have gone so horribly bad. Oh, no, he's wounded, too. Oh, gosh.
You can recover. It's fine.
Oh, the shame. I'm so embarrassed. Viewers, I was really just kicking ass prior to this point, and to have lost this one and only Total War battle that I fought on History Respawn is just, well, it's a shame I'll never outlive.
Well, see, now you're behaving like a Homeric hero, because when they get ashamed, what they mostly do is give up, sometimes commit suicide in the form of the very famous Ajax, who gets so upset about the fact that Athena made him mad that he kills himself because he can't deal with it anymore.
Well, I'm not quite to that point just yet, thankfully, but I think I am done with this stream. So, Kate, thank you so much for joining me. Is there anything you want to plug while we're still on here?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things we talked about actually was the representation of women in this game, or the lack of them, certainly on the Greek side. And that's something I'm working on with a colleague of mine, Jane Draycott, at the University of Glasgow at the moment, and putting together a volume on the representation of women in classical video games. So if you're interested in things like why there's only the Amazons and them only on the Trojan side, or we did the Assassin's Creed History Respawned podcast a while ago, and we'll be looking at Assassin's Creed in the volume as well, so your viewers can keep an eye out for that.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of History Respawn. If you're interested in the show, please check us out on historyrespawn.com. And if you're interested in supporting our work, please go to www.patreon.com/History Respawn. Until next time, goodbye. Let me see if I can auto-resolve this and get some sort of victory here. Close victory. There we go. We let the computer handle it, and I end up winning. This is fantastic.